"Where are we?" asked the old man. "In a dark wood," replied the young man. "Who are you?" inquired the old man. "Just a brother," the young man responded. "Stop," the old man commanded. "Let me look at you. It is dark, and I am blind. For me, it is always dark. I can see with my hands, if you will allow me." "Yes." The old man first felt the young man's wavy hair. "Please describe the color of your hair." "Have you seen colors?" "I have never had sight." "Then how can I describe colors? I know the cold on my skin of the black, moonless night," said the blind old man. "I know the cool, damp of the brown earth. I know the warmth of golden bright sunshine. I know the searing heat of red fire. Which of these is it?" "My hair is the color of golden bright sunshine." The old man ran his fingers over the young man's face. "You look like a god. The god Apollo, god of archers, music, and dance. My twin brother was compared to a statue of the god Apollo," the young man shared. "My twin brother's hair was the color of golden sunlight, like mine, but he dyed it the color of cold, black night." A woman screamed. The young man grabbed the arm of the old man, and together they made their way through the dark wood, in the direction of the scream, to a small log cabin on the shore of a black lake. The cabin door was open, warm yellow light streaming out. Two young women stood in the doorway, a blonde just inside the cabin, and a dark-haired one with both feet outside, leaning forward, straining against the blonde woman's grip around her waist. Despite their differing hair colors, the two looked so similar that the young man assumed they must be sisters. "What's the use?" the dark-haired sister said. "I can't take this anymore." With that, she broke free from her sister's grip and ran directly toward the black lake behind the cabin. Upon reaching the lake's shore, she threw herself into the water without hesitation. The lake swallowed her up, leaving the still, black surface undisturbed. The remaining sister's shoulders slumped. "I knew it," she said, addressing the young man and the old man, seemingly unsurprised by their presence. "I knew she would do it. I couldn't stop her." "I'm sorry," the blind old man said. "I have no sight." "What did she do?" "She went into the lake of the forgotten," the blonde woman replied. "She couldn't resist its pull anymore. I don't know how much longer I can." "Was she your sister?" the young man asked, although he felt he already knew the answer. "Yes, she was my sister." "Then I am sorry for your loss," the young man said. "And I wish I had come sooner," the old man added. "What could you have done?" the remaining sister asked, before turning her back on them and retreating into the small log cabin. She left the door open, allowing the warm, yellow light to spill out into the cold, dark night. As they entered and closed the door, the old man said, "Describe it to me." "It's a massive room," the young man replied, "much larger than what should fit inside this small cabin. It's the size of a grand hall in a castle. I see hundreds of people sitting in fiery red, earthy brown, and pitch black leather chairs, gathered around small tables in groups of various sizes. Some are eating, while others play board games, cards, or dice. There are no windows, but dozens of closed doors surround the hall, and the walls are lined with shelves filled with leather-bound books. In the center of the room is a large, empty stone floor with a fire pit, beside which sits an unoccupied yellow leather chair, reminiscent of warm golden sunlight. "Thank you," said the old man. "Your description is very vivid. I can see it all in my mind's eye. Please bring me one of the leather-bound books." "Which one?" "Any will do. I'll just stand right here and wait for you." The young man approached the nearest bookshelf, still 50 paces from where they had entered, and randomly selected a book to open. To his surprise, the pages were all blank. He opened another and another, finding the same result. Every page was blank. "This is strange," he thought, "but so is everything else about this place. And I suppose it doesn't matter to a blind man." He carried one of the blank books back to the blind man. "Thank you," the old man said, accepting the book. "Now, lead me to the chair by the fire pit." As the old man settled into the yellow chair, the previously silent crowd suddenly erupted in moans, grumbles, and cries of protest. "Don't sit there," someone shouted. The old man merely smiled. "Nobody sits there," another person yelled. "Well, I am sitting here," the old man responded calmly. A solitary man, who had been seated at the table nearest the fire pit in yellow chair, now stood and approached the old man. "No one has ever sat there before," he said. "I don't know why, but I do know that chair is not for those of us without stories of our own." "Describe this man to me," the old man requested. "He is tall and thin, with fine features, the young man began. His hair is the color of red-hot fire, and his eyes are the blue-green hue of cool water on a warm summer day. He's dressed in the attire of a servant. "What is your name?" "Heinrich," said the red-haired man dressed in livery. "They call me Iron Heinrich. You said you cannot sit in this chair because you have no story of your own." "None of us here have stories of our own," said Iron Heinrich. "We only have parts of stories." "Then tell me your part." And so Iron Heinrich told the story of a prince who was turned into a frog, and how a princess kissed the frog, and he became a prince again. "My part of the story," said Iron Heinrich, "feels like an afterthought. I was the servant of the prince, and I was known then as Faithful Heinrich. When the prince was changed into a frog, I had my heart bound in 3 iron bands, to keep it from bursting with grief, for iron is stronger than grief. Then, on the day of the prince's wedding to the princess, the 3 iron bands broke away and fell off, one by one, making a loud crack, as each broke away from my heart, for love is stronger than iron. And so I was renamed to Iron Heinrich. That is it. My little part in the story. I appear at the very end, and there is so little connection to the story of the Frog Prince, that mostly my part is forgotten when the tale is told." The young man said, "At least you have a part in the story." "Yes, I do," said Iron Heinrich, "but then what? Is that all there is for me? A part in someone else's story?" "You want your own story," the old man stated. "Yes," said Iron Heinrich. "Is that so much to ask? All you need to do is ask." "And it just so happens," the old man said, opening the leather-bound book to one of the blank pages, "that I have your story right here." The old man began recounting Iron Heinrich's tale, and as he did, the young man saw words materialize on the pages, accompanied by vivid illustrations in bright colors. In the story, Iron Heinrich was strolling through a meadow when he discovered a suit of armor bound to a rock with heavy iron chains. The armor belonged to the future king who was destined to rule the land. A witch had tethered the armor to the rock and cast a spell on it, preventing anyone from even approaching it. Consequently, the kingdom was without a ruler, allowing witches, fairies, and imps to roam freely, causing mischief like tipping cows, curdling milk, and turning people into toads. However, Iron Heinrich, whose heart was pure and good, bravely approached the suit of armor, and touched the iron heart at the center of the breastplate. Instantly, the iron chains shattered, and the enchanted suit of armor was liberated. Iron Heinrich donned the suit of armor, and then, Iron Heinrich's blue-green eyes widened with anticipation. "What happens to me then?" The old man closed the book. "That is for you to discover," he said, patting the book. "Your story is written here, but you must live it out. As you do, you won't know what comes next. Only when you look back will you understand the full tale. I assure you, it's a captivating story filled with heroic acts, laughter, delicious food and drink, romance, and even friendships. Of course, there will be dark moments, challenges, and sadness, but in the end, you will well. I cannot reveal the conclusion. Now tell me, do you see a door with an iron heart in this room?" Iron Heinrich glanced around. "Yes," he replied, "I see it." The young man noticed it as well. One of the doors now had an iron heart in its center. It hadn't been there before, but now it appeared. "When you exit through that door," the old man explained, "you'll find yourself in a meadow with a magical suit of armor chained to a rock. That's where your story begins." Iron Heinrich expressed his gratitude to the old man and approached the door adorned with the iron heart. As he opened it, a lush green meadow and a bright, blue, cloudless sky greeted him. He stepped through the doorway and closed it behind him. The iron heart on the door glowed red for an instant before disappearing. It was now the turn of the young, blonde woman whose sister had ventured into the Lake of the Forgotten. "My name is Javotte," she said. "My poor sister and I shared the same role in a story. We were inseparable, so I didn't even have my own distinct part." "I know how that feels," said the young man. "But it gets worse," Javotte continued. "Our shared role portrayed us as mean, arrogant stepsisters." "You mean, like in Cinderella?" the young man asked, as those were the stepsisters he thought of first. "Exactly, in Cinderella. That's her story. Our stepsister, Ella, whom we called Cinderella because she sat in the fireplace's cinders to keep warm. When I mentioned mean, arrogant stepsisters, you immediately thought of us, didn't you? My sister and I. That's all we are, mean and arrogant. That's why my sister entered the lake of the forgotten. How would you like it if all you were known for was being mean and arrogant? At least you're known for something, the young man replied. The old man opened the book, flipped past the pages with Heinrich's story, until he reached the next blank page. The young man watched as words and illustrations appeared on the page. Then, suddenly, the old man closed the book. Some songs, he said, and in a minor key. You mean, Javotte asked, a tragedy, a brave tale of sacrifice. You would be remembered as a heroine. But yes, this story, should you choose to accept it, is a tragedy. Will I love and be loved? The old man opened the book again. A single tear formed in one of his pale eyes, ran down his cheek, and fell onto the page. Yes, he said, you will love and be loved. Then, Javotte said, I want that story. She straightened her shoulders, which had been slumped since her sister dove into the lake of the forgotten, and noticed a large teardrop on one of the doors. She thanked the old man and left through the door. After Javotte exited and closed the door behind her, the teardrop glowed blue for a moment before disappearing, and so it continued as one by one, the people left their chairs and stood before the old, blind man to receive their very own story. The young man noticed that as time went by, the old man began asking for his thoughts and ideas. The old man would then use the young man's input to weave the stories until eventually, the young man told the stories with just a prompt from the old man. The old, blind man sat back in his yellow leather chair, smiling and nodding as the young man shared the stories. After the last person had left to live their own story, the old, blind man said, Now, young man, it is time for you to tell me your story. What do you mean? The young man asked. I don't have a story. I'm just a brother. So you say, but you have a name. I have a name, but I had no life. Let's begin with your name. The young man hesitated for a moment before letting out a deep sigh and saying, My name is Jesse Garon Presley. I was born lifeless, followed by my twin brother, Elvis Aaron Presley, who entered this world alive and became a renowned singer. Throughout his life, Elvis mourned my absence. But that's all there is to me, the lost twin brother who never existed. It wasn't until I found myself in this dark forest, holding your arm, that I even was. Now let me share my story, the elderly, blind man began. My name is Demodocus. There once was a legendary storyteller known as Homer, perhaps the most celebrated ever. He narrated the tale of a hero named Odysseus in a story called the Odyssey. In that epic, I play a minor role, where I recount stories to Odysseus. My stories were so powerful that they brought the mighty hero to tears, and through that catharsis, he found the strength to tell his own tale. Homer made me blind, as he himself was sightless. In a way, he created me in his own image, placing a part of himself within the story. But that's all I am, a storyteller. I can share the narratives of others, yet I have no story of my own. Jesse, the young blonde man, said, Demodocus, now that you've taught me to tell stories, I will tell you your story. You, Demodocus, travel through worlds to find those who feel their life stories are yet untold. Regardless of who they are, what they've done, or their age, you assist and inspire them to live their own stories. Thank you, said Demodocus, the old, blind storyteller. Yes, I accept. That will be my story. The old man stood up, took the young man's hand, and guided him into the yellow chair. Once Jesse was seated by the fire pit, the old man bowed and then looked straight at him with his milky white eyes. Now let me tell you your own story, said the old, blind man, his voice echoing in the vast, empty hall. Just as I, Demodocus, help real people in real worlds live their stories, you, Jesse Garon Presley, who never lived, are the teller of untold stories for those who come to this hall. You recount the tales of story people who never existed outside of fairy tales, myths, poems, and fiction, who only have roles in other people's stories. Do you accept this as your own story? I do, said Jesse, and I'm grateful, but surprised. I believed my role in the story would be to serve as your guide. I had accepted the idea of merely being a part of your story. That's far better than being someone who never even had a story. But now, you've set me free to live my own story, for as long as there are stories told and characters with minor roles, which is to say forever. Thank you, Demodocus. However, I must ask, how can you, being blind, navigate through the worlds without someone to guide you? I am guided, Demodocus replied, by the beacons of hope, shining like candles across the worlds. I see hope in the darkness. I walk through darkness towards hope. All I need from those whose stories are yet untold is their faintest glow of hope.